The alarms blared throughout the command ship as Admiral Q rushed to the bridge. His forearms moved quickly over the control panels. The main screen showed 50 large ships, all drifting slowly in space. None of them had working engines. Status. Report, Q demanded, his silver scales reflecting the red emergency lights. Officer Day looked up from her station, her face tight with worry. All quantum drives have failed, Admiral. Every single ship in the fleet. It happened right after we passed through that strange nebula. Q stared at the screen. 30,000 of his people were on these ships. Men, women, and children who had trusted him to lead them to safety after their homeworld began to die. Now they were stuck in an empty part of space with no help nearby. How much power do we have left, he asked. 3 weeks at most, Day replied. Maybe 4 if we shut down all non-essential systems. Q nodded slowly. And how long until we reach the nearest friendly system? The navigator looked up. Without quantum drives, years, Admiral. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. They would run out of food and air long before they could reach safety. There must be something we can do, Q said, refusing to give up. Officer Day, take a team and inspect the drive cores. Maybe they can be fixed. Yes, Admiral, Day said, hurrying from the bridge. Q turned to his communications officer. Send out distress signals on all frequencies. Tell anyone who can hear us that we have civilians on board. Sir, the nearest known species to this region are the Zelt. They don't help outsiders, the communications officer reminded him. Send the signals anyway, Q ordered, and find us a safe place to orbit while we figure this out. 6 hours later, Q stood in the massive engine room of the command ship. Officer Day walked around the quantum drive core, which now sat dark and lifeless. Normally it would glow with bright blue energy. Can you fix it? Q asked, though he could already guess the answer from her face. Day shook her head. The radiation from that nebula did something I've never seen before. It's like the quantum particles in the core have been scrambled. They don't respond to any of our systems anymore. She pointed to a display screen showing microscopic views of the drive components. We've checked 3 other ships, all the same. Q closed his primary eyes for a moment, keeping his secondary ones open as was custom when processing bad news. So the drives are completely dead? Yes, Admiral. We can't fix them with what we have on board. D hesitated. And sir, it's worse than we thought. The life support systems are drawing more power than normal. Something in that nebula affected them too. We may only have 2 weeks of power, not 3. Q felt the weight of 30,000 lives pressing down on him. His people had already lost so much. Their beautiful homeworld was dying, its core becoming unstable after thousands of years of peace. The evacuation had taken everything they had. This fleet carried not just people, but the last hope of their entire civilization. Find us a place to orbit, he ordered. Somewhere stable where we can power down as many systems as possible. 2 days later, the fleet had established orbit around a small, frozen moon. The ships formed a protective circle, conserving power, while continuing to broadcast distress signals. In the large meeting hall of the command ship, Q addressed the ship captains and community leaders. The mood was grim. We have sent messages to every known species within range, Q explained. So far, we have received no response. A captain from one of the civilian ships stood up. What about the emergency colony pods? Could we land on this moon? Q shook his head. The surface temperature is too extreme and there's no atmosphere. The pods wouldn't function. We've scanned every planet in this system. None can support our biology. An elder spoke next, her voice calm despite the situation. How long can we survive, Admiral? Q looked at Officer Day, who nodded slightly. The people deserve the truth. At current power usage, our reserves will last 12 days, Q said. We've found a way to extend that. We can place most of our people in cryostasis. This would reduce power needs and give us about 4 weeks instead. Whispers spread through the room. Cryostasis was risky, especially for the very young and the elderly. 4 weeks is still not enough time for anyone to reach us, even if they wanted to help, another captain pointed out. It gives us more time to find a solution, Q responded. and more time for someone to hear our calls for help. The meeting continued for hours as they worked out the details. They would keep essential personnel awake: engineers, medical staff, and a small security team. Everyone else would go into cryostasis, with the children and elderly placed in the most stable units at the center of each ship. 5 days later, Q walked through the quiet halls of his ship, where once thousands of people had lived, talked, and worked. Now only a skeleton crew of 50 remained awake. The rest slept in the cryostasis chambers, their lives paused until either rescue came or the power ran out. He entered the small control room, where Day monitored the fleet's power levels. She looked tired. None of them had slept much in the past week. "How are the reserves holding?" Q asked. "Better than expected," Day said. "With so many in cryostasis, we might get 5 weeks instead of 4. Q nodded. It was a small piece of good news, but he would take anything positive right now. "Any responses to our signals?" "Nothing." Day's shoulders dropped. "I've been thinking, Admiral. If we took the remaining power from 10 of our smallest ships, we could boost one ship's engines enough for sublight travel. Not fast, but maybe enough to reach a trade route where they could find help." Q considered this. That would mean leaving those 10 ships with no power at all. If help doesn't come back in time... "I know," Day said softly, "but it might be our only chance." Before Q could answer, the sensor operator called out from across the room. "Admiral, I'm detecting multiple ships entering the system." Q rushed to the main screen. "Are they responding to our distress call? Can you identify them?" The operator shook his head. "Unknown design, sir. They're approaching at high speed. Wait, they're hailing us." "Put them through," Q ordered, feeling both hope and caution. In their vulnerable state, an unknown species could be either salvation or the final blow to his people. The screen flickered, and a face appeared, a species Q had never seen before. The being had no scales, just smooth skin, and only 2 arms. Its eyes were fixed forward in its face with no secondary pair. "This is Captain Han Jin-ho of the United Earth Alliance vessel Dauntless," the being said in clear galactic standard. "We received your distress signal. We've come to help." Q felt his 4 hands trembling slightly. These humans, as they called themselves, were unknown to him. But right now they were offering something his people desperately needed: hope. "This is Admiral Q of the Tellurian Evacuation Fleet," he responded. "We welcome your assistance, Captain Han Jin-ho. Our situation is grave." The human captain nodded, his expression serious but kind. "We understand, Admiral. We've brought supplies and engineering teams. With your permission, we'd like to dock and assess how we can help." For the first time in days, Q felt something other than despair. He didn't know if these humans could save his people, but they had done something no one else had. They had shown up. "Permission granted, Captain," Q said. "And thank you." Captain Han Jin-ho stood in the airlock of his ship, the Dauntless. He adjusted his uniform and took a deep breath. This would be humanity's first contact with the Tellurian species. As the door slid open, he stepped forward with a small team: Officer Yoon, his chief engineer, and 2 security personnel who carried supply crates rather than weapons. The Tellurian greeting party waited in the docking area. Jin-ho was surprised by their appearance. Admiral Q stood taller than any human, with silvery scales that shimmered under the lights. Most striking were his 4 arms and the second pair of smaller eyes above his main ones. Jin-ho bowed slightly, a gesture his team had agreed might be universal enough to show respect, without causing offense. "Admiral Q, I'm Captain Han Jin-ho. Thank you for allowing us to dock." The Admiral's upper eyes blinked while his lower ones remained fixed on Jin-ho. "It is we who should thank you, Captain. Few would respond to a distress call from an unknown species," Jin-ho smiled. "On Earth, helping those in trouble is considered a duty, not a choice." Officer Yoon stepped forward. She was small compared to Jin-ho, but her reputation as an engineering genius made her presence essential. "We've brought emergency supplies and technical equipment," she said. With your permission, I'd like to begin assessing your drive systems. Q turned to a female Tellurian at his side. This is Technical Officer Day. She will show you our engine rooms and explain our situation. Day nodded. Follow me, please. Though I must warn you, our quantum drive technology may be very different from yours. Different technologies often lead to new solutions, Yoon replied with confidence. As they left, Jin-Ho turned back to Q. Admiral, how many people do you have on your ships? 30,000, Q answered. Most are in cryostasis to conserve power. They are refugees from our dying homeworld, seeking a new place to live. Jin-Ho tried not to show his shock. He had expected perhaps a few thousand. 30,000 was an enormous number to save with just 4 human ships. I understand, Jin-Ho said. While our engineers work, perhaps you could show me your life support systems. We've brought supplies that might help extend your reserves. In the massive engine room of the Tellurian command ship, Officer Yoon stared at the dark quantum drive core. It was unlike anything she had seen before. Where human ships used controlled fusion reactions to power warp fields, the Tellurians manipulated quantum particles directly. The radiation from the nebula caused what we call quantum decay, Dai explained. The particles no longer respond to our control systems. Yoon walked slowly around the core, her mind racing. Our ships use a completely different system, she said. But perhaps that's an advantage. Sometimes you need a fresh perspective. She opened her tablet and began taking readings. The basic principles of energy are universal. If we can't fix your drives, maybe we can find a way to adapt ours to power your ships. Day's 4 hands moved quickly as she brought up technical diagrams on a large screen. Do you really think that's possible? Our technologies evolved independently. Humans have a saying, Yoon replied with a small smile. Necessity is the mother of invention. When we need to solve a problem badly enough, we find a way. She tapped her communication device. Captain, I need to bring more equipment from the Dauntless, and I should contact the other human ships. We're going to need all the engineering help we can get. Admiral Q led Jin-Ho through the ship's life support control center. The human captain listened carefully as Q explained their systems. The biggest problem is power, Q said. Even with most of our people in cryostasis, we will run out in about 5 weeks. Jin-Ho nodded. We can help with that immediately. Our ships can transfer power to yours while we work on a more permanent solution. A young Tellurian rushed into the room. Admiral, we have a problem in cryostasis section 3. The cooling systems are failing. Q's scales seemed to pale. There are over 2,000 people in that section. Without hesitation, Jin-Ho tapped his communicator. This is Captain Han. I need all available emergency teams to dock with the Tellurian flagship immediately. Bring portable cooling units and power cells. He turned to Q. Take me there. My people have experience with extreme conditions. We can help. Hours later, Jin-Ho sat with Admiral Q in a small meeting room. Both leaders looked tired but relieved. The crisis in the cryostasis section had been averted, thanks to the quick response of the human emergency teams. Your people worked alongside mine as if we had trained together for years, Q said. I did not expect such compatibility. Jin-Ho smiled. Humans adapt quickly. It's one of our strengths. But why? Q asked, his 4 hands resting on the table. Why would you risk so much for aliens you've never met? Most species in this galaxy would have ignored our distress call or worse, seen it as an opportunity to take advantage of our weakness. Jin-Ho considered the question carefully. Earth only achieved faster than light travel 15 years ago. We're newcomers to the galactic community, but before that our history was filled with both conflict and cooperation. We learned, sometimes the hard way, that helping others is not just morally right. It makes us all stronger. He leaned forward. Besides, I was an emergency responder before I joined the space fleet. When someone calls for help, you go. That's all there is to it. Q's primary eyes blinked slowly. A simple but powerful principle. Jin-Ho's communicator beeped. Excuse me, he said, answering it. This is the captain. Sir, it's Officer Yoon. I think you should come to the engine room. we've made a discovery. In the engine room, Officer Yoon and Day had set up a temporary work area surrounded by screens, tools, and equipment from both species. Engineers from both the human and Tellurian crews worked side by side. "What have you found?" Jin-Ho asked as he entered with Admiral Q. Yoon, pointed to a simulation running on her tablet. "The damage to the Tellurian drives is permanent. They can't be repaired with available materials." Q's shoulders slumped. Day looked down at the floor. "But," Yoon continued, "we might be able to create a hybrid system." She brought up a new diagram. Humans use controlled fusion to create warp fields. Tellurians use quantum manipulation for instant travel. Very different approaches, but both convert energy into motion. If we can adapt our fusion generators to power Tellurian systems, is that possible? Jin-Ho asked. Theoretically, Day answered, her voice cautious but hopeful. It would require significant modifications to both our technologies. Yoon nodded. And a lot of trial and error. But between your quantum knowledge and our fusion expertise, I believe we can make it work. Jin-Ho turned to Q. "Admiral, I need to contact Earth. This is going to require more resources than we have on our 4 ships. Will your government agree to help?" Q asked. "This could take weeks, possibly months." Jin-Ho smiled. "When humanity joined the galactic community, we made a promise to ourselves. We would be the kind of neighbors we wished to find among the stars." He tapped his communicator. "This is Captain Han Jin-Ho of the Dauntless. Connect me to Earth Command. Priority message." As they waited for the connection, Jin-Ho looked at the Tellurian and human teams already working together. "We will not abandon you, Admiral. Your people will not die here." For the first time since their ships had become stranded, Admiral Q felt real hope. These humans were unlike any species he had encountered before. They helped not because of treaties or profit, but simply because they could. The communication screen lit up. Earth Command responding. "Go ahead, Dauntless." Jin-Ho straightened his uniform. "Command, we have a situation here. I'm requesting the largest humanitarian mission in Earth's history." 1 week after Captain Jin-Ho's call to Earth, the space around the stranded Tellurian fleet buzzed with activity. 30 human ships had arrived, ranging from small, fast transports to large science vessels. Each brought supplies, specialists, and volunteers eager to help. On the bridge of the Tellurian command ship, Admiral Q watched the screens with amazement. "Your people responded so quickly," he said to Jin-Ho, who stood beside him. "When I explained the situation, there was no debate," Jin-Ho replied. "Earth sent everyone who could help." A new ship appeared at the edge of the system, larger than the others. Its hull gleamed in the distant starlight. "The Horizon has arrived," Jin-Ho said with a smile. "That's our most advanced research vessel. And it's bringing someone who might be the key to helping your people." Dr. Song stepped off the shuttle onto the Tellurian ship. She was older than most of the other humans, with gray hair tied back neatly. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, she had studied many alien species, but never the Tellurians. Jin-Ho greeted her warmly. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Doctor." "When I heard about 30,000 people in cryostasis, I didn't hesitate," she replied. "Take me to them immediately. I need to understand their biology if we're going to keep them alive." In the main cryostasis chamber, Dr. Song moved carefully between the rows of pods. Each held a sleeping Tellurian, their silver scales dulled by the freezing temperatures. She took readings with her equipment, occasionally making notes. "What have you found?" Jin-Ho asked after she had examined several pods. Dr. Song looked concerned. "The cryostasis technology is failing. The power fluctuations are causing temperature instabilities. If this continues, we'll start losing people within 2 weeks." Q, who had joined them, felt his heart sink. "Can anything be done?" Dr. Song nodded slowly. "Perhaps. There's a surprising similarity between human and Tellurian cellular structures. I need to run more tests, but I believe we might be able to use human biological material to stabilize your cryostasis systems." "What kind of biological material?" Jin-Ho asked. "Stem cells," Dr. Song explained. "With the right modifications, They could help maintain the proper conditions in the pods. She looked at Q. But we would need many donors. Jin-Ho didn't hesitate. Put out the call to all human ships. Explain what's needed. I'll be the first volunteer. In the engine room, the situation was equally tense. Officer Yoon and Technical Officer Day hadn't slept in days. Around them, teams of human and Tellurian engineers worked on different parts of their hybrid drive project. A young human engineer named Kim approached them, holding a tablet. "I think I've found something," he said, his voice excited despite his obvious exhaustion. Yoon took the tablet and studied the diagrams. "This could work," she said after a moment. "Instead of trying to completely rebuild the Tellurian drives, we adapt our fusion reactors to provide power in a form their systems can use." "It won't be perfect," Kim admitted. "The conversion process will lose a lot of energy, but it might be enough to get the fleet moving." Day looked at the calculations. "At this efficiency level, we could move at about 30% of our normal speed. Not enough to reach any habitable system, but better than not moving at all," Yoon finished for her. "Let's build a prototype immediately." 2 days later, Captain Jin-Ho stood with Admiral Q in a small medical bay. Both leaders had bandages on their arms where Dr. Song had taken samples. "Over, Bob. 800 human volunteers so far," Jin-Ho said. "Dr. Song says it's more than enough to stabilize all the cryostasis pods." Q looked at the human captain, still trying to understand these strange aliens. "You donate parts of yourselves to help complete strangers. Your people risk their safety to save mine." "Why?" Before Jin-Ho could answer, his communicator beeped. "Captain, this is Yoon. We're ready to test the prototype. You should be here." The prototype sat in the center of a reinforced test chamber. It was an odd-looking device, part human technology, part Tellurian, with cables and cooling tubes connecting the different components. "It doesn't look like much," Kim admitted as the leaders entered. "Most great inventions don't," Jin-Ho replied. Yoon explained the system. "We've taken a small fusion reactor from one of our shuttles and modified it to output energy in a form that the Tellurian systems can use. If this works, we can scale it up for the entire fleet." Day stood at a control panel, ready to begin test sequence. Everyone moved behind a safety barrier. Yoon nodded to Day, who began the startup process. The human fusion reactor hummed to life, its blue glow intensifying. Energy flowed through the adapters they had built, into the remains of a Tellurian drive component. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Tellurian crystal at the heart of the system began to glow with its own light, dim at first, then brighter. "It's working," Kim exclaimed. "The crystal is accepting the energy." The celebration was cut short. As alarms blared, the crystal's glow became unstable, flashing erratically. "Shut it down," Yoon shouted. Day quickly cut the power. The glow faded and the alarm stopped. "What happened?" Jin-Ho asked. Yoon checked the readings. Energy conversion was successful, but the flow was too unstable. The Tellurian components weren't designed to handle the fluctuations from our fusion process. Q stepped forward. "But it did work for a moment." "Yes," Day confirmed. "The principle is sound. We just need to find a way to stabilize the energy flow." Jin-Ho looked at the teams of humans and Tellurians working together. "Then that's what we'll do. Keep working." Later that evening, Jin-Ho stood in the observation room of the Tellurian flagship. Through the large windows, he could see Earth's ships positioned around the Tellurian fleet, sharing power and resources. Admiral Q joined him. "Your engineer Kim suggested a new approach. For the drive system, they're building a second prototype now." Jin-Ho nodded. "Kim is brilliant, one of our best. And Dr. Song has already treated over 2,000 cryostasis pods with her stem cell solution," Q added. "Those people will now survive at least 3 more months." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the stars. "You never answered my question," Q said eventually. "Why do your people help us this way?" Jin-Ho thought about it. "Have you ever been alone, Admiral? Truly alone, with no one to turn to?" "Yes," Q replied softly. when our homeworld began to die. Humans understand loneliness, Jinho said. For thousands of years, we thought we were alone in the universe. We looked up at the stars and wondered if anyone else was out there. When we finally reached space and met other species, we promised ourselves we would never let anyone feel as alone as we once did. He turned to face the Tellurian admiral. That's why we help. Because no one should face the darkness of space alone. Q remained silent, processing these words. Jinho's communicator beeped again. Captain, this is Dr. Song. I need to speak with you and Admiral Q immediately. I found something important about the Tellurian biology. Jinho and Q exchanged glances. Good news or bad? Jinho asked. Both, came Dr. Song's reply. And it changes everything. Captain Jinho and Admiral Q hurried to the medical lab where Dr. Song waited for them. Her workspace was filled with samples and equipment. Large screens showed magnified images of cells, some human, some Tellurian. What have you found, Doctor? Jinho asked. Dr. Song gestured to the screens. I've been studying the Tellurian biology more deeply. The compatibility between our species is remarkable. She pointed to specific cells. The stem cell treatments for the cryostasis pods are working. Better than expected, but I've discovered something even more important. She pulled up a new image. Tellurian cells can absorb and store energy in a way human cells cannot. Q leaned closer to the screen. This is common knowledge among our people. Our bodies evolved to store energy for survival during resource shortages. Yes, but what's uncommon is how your cells interact with our fusion energy, Dr. Song explained. The tests show that properly treated Tellurian tissue could serve as a perfect buffer between our fusion reactors and your quantum systems. Jinho's eyes widened. Are you suggesting we use Tellurian biological material in the drive system? Exactly, Dr. Song nodded. A living interface between our technologies. Q looked thoughtful. Such techniques exist in our medical science, but we've never applied them to engine systems. It would require volunteers, Dr. Song said. Tellurians willing to donate tissue samples, just as humans have donated stem cells. Q straightened his tall frame. I will be the first volunteer. My people will follow. Engineer Kim stood with Officer Yoon and Dae as they reviewed the new design. The second prototype looked very different from the first. At its center was a special container holding Tellurian tissue samples suspended in a nutrient solution. The Po living buffer should stabilize the energy flow, Kim explained. Dr. Song's team prepared the samples from Admiral Q and 20 other volunteers. Yoon looked concerned. We're merging biology and technology in a way neither of our species has attempted before. There are so many unknowns. That is the nature of true innovation, Dae said. We must try. The test chamber was more crowded this time. Besides the engineers, Dr. Song was present, along with Captain Jinho and Admiral Q. Beginning startup sequence, Yoon announced. The fusion reactor came to life first, its blue glow steady and controlled. The energy flowed into the biological buffer, which began to pulse with a soft silver light, the same color as Tellurian scales. Everyone held their breath as the energy continued through to the Tellurian quantum components. The crystal began to glow, brighter than before and, most importantly, stable. Power flow is steady, Dae reported, her voice tight with excitement. The buffer is working. It's regulating the energy perfectly. The testing equipment showed the quantum field beginning to form. Weak, but definitely present. Can you increase power? Jinho asked. Yoon nodded and slowly adjusted the controls. The glow intensified, and the quantum field expanded. We've reached 30% of normal drive capacity, Dae announced. That's the maximum this prototype can handle, but it's stable. The room erupted in cheers. Humans and Tellurians embraced without hesitation, the differences between their species forgotten in the moment of triumph. We did it, Kim said, hardly believing their success. Admiral Q turned to Jinho. This proves the concept, but scaling it up for 50 ships is an enormous task. Jinho smiled. Then we better get started. 2 weeks later, Jinho stood on the bridge of the Dauntless. On the main screen, a video call showed Admiral Chen from Earth Command. "The situation is complex, Captain," Admiral Chen said. "What you're proposing goes far beyond a rescue mission. You're talking about a 2-year journey escorting the Tellurian fleet to a habitable system." "Yes, Admiral," Jinho replied firmly. "The hybrid drive system works, but at only 30% efficiency. The Tellurian ships cannot make the journey alone. They need our continued support." Admiral Chen frowned. "You're asking for significant resources, Captain. 20 ships dedicated to this mission for at least 2 years. Some in the leadership are concerned about the commitment." Jinho leaned forward. "Admiral, there are 30,000 refugees on those ships, their entire civilization. Would we abandon them after coming this far?" After a long pause, Admiral Chen nodded. "The Council has voted. Your mission is approved. You'll get the ships and supplies you need." "Thank you, Admiral," Jinho said, relieved. "There's one condition," Admiral Chen added. "All personnel must be volunteers. We can't order anyone to undertake such a long mission." "I understand." After the call ended, Jinho sat quietly for a moment. Then he opened the ship-wide communication channel. "This is Captain Han Jinho. I have an announcement for all personnel. Our mission has changed. We have been authorized to escort the Tellurian fleet to a suitable colony world. This journey will take approximately 2 years. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "No one will be ordered to participate. This must be voluntary. Those who wish to return to Earth can do so on the supply ships leaving tomorrow. Those who choose to stay will be part of the greatest humanitarian mission in human history. You have until 800 hours to decide." The next morning, Jinho stood in the main hangar as the crews assembled. He had expected to lose at least half, his people. Many had families back on Earth. 2 years was a long time to be away. The hangar doors opened and Jinho was shocked. Every member of his crew stood there, in perfect formation. His first officer stepped forward. "Captain, all personnel are present and accounted for. No one has requested transfer back to Earth." Jinho could barely find his voice. "All of you? You're all staying?" "Yes, sir," the first officer replied with a smile. "It seems your crew believes in this mission as much as you do." Reports soon came in from the other human ships. The result was the same across the entire fleet. Not a single person had chosen to leave. Later that day, Jinho met with Admiral Q on the observation deck of the Tellurian flagship. Through the windows, they could see teams of humans and Tellurians working together on the first full-scale hybrid drive installation. "Your crew all chose to stay," Q said. "It wasn't a question." Jinho nodded. "Not just my crew. Every human in the fleet. Over 3,000 people." Q's 4 hands moved in a gesture of deep respect. "My people do not understand this level of sacrifice for strangers." "Perhaps we're not strangers anymore," Jinho suggested. "No," Q agreed. "We are not." They watched as a human engineer helped a Tellurian child who had been recently awakened from cryostasis. The child was learning to use a human tablet, laughing at something the engineer said. "We have marked a suitable planet," Q said. "It's in a peaceful sector, 8 months away at our current speed. The preliminary scans show it can support both Tellurian and human biology." Jinho raised an eyebrow. "Both?" "Yes," Q said. Dr. Song confirmed it. "Our species are remarkably compatible. The planet could support a mixed colony if your people wish to join us." Jinho looked surprised. "Are you inviting us to settle with you? After all you've done, it seems only right to share our new home," Q replied. "Besides, I think our peoples have much to learn from each other." Before Jinho could respond, alarms began to sound throughout the ship. Both leaders rushed to the nearest communication panel. "This is Admiral Q. Report." A Tellurian voice came through, sounding urgent. "Admiral, we're detecting multiple ships entering the system. They're not human." Jinho and Q exchanged worried glances. "The human Tellurian fleet was vulnerable during the drive installations. Can you identify them?" Q asked. There was a pause before the response came. "Yes, Admiral. They're Zelt warships, 5 of them, heavily armed. Jin-Ho saw Q's scales pale. "Who are the Zelt?" he asked. "A species known for salvaging ships in distress," Q explained grimly. "They take what they want and leave the crews to die." Jin-Ho's expression hardened. "Not this time. Not while we're here." He tapped his communicator. "This is Captain Han to all human vessels. Battle stations. Protect the Tellurian fleet at all costs." The human ships moved quickly, forming a protective barrier around the Tellurian fleet. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Captain Jin-Ho studied the approaching Zelt warships on the main screen. They were dark, angular vessels with weapon systems, clearly visible on their hulls. "Open a channel," Jin-Ho ordered. "All frequencies." When the communication officer nodded, Jin-Ho spoke clearly and firmly. "Attention, Zelt vessels. This is Captain Han Jin-Ho of the United Earth Alliance. The Tellurian fleet is under our protection. State your intentions." For several tense moments there was no response. Then the screen flickered and a Zelt commander appeared. The alien had dark gray skin and eyes with vertical pupils. "This is Commander Vex of the Zelt Salvage Authority. We detected disabled vessels in this sector. By salvage rights, they belong to us." Jin-Ho kept his expression neutral. "These ships are not abandoned. They are being repaired under Earth's protection. There will be no salvage today." The Zelt commander's eyes narrowed. "We've never heard of Earth or its protection. Our sensors show your ships are outnumbered. Be wise, Captain. Leave now, and you won't be harmed." "I suggest you scan again," Jin-Ho replied calmly. "You might have missed something." As if on cue, 15 more human ships dropped out of warp at the edge of the system. They had been part of a supply convoy, but now they moved into defensive formations. Jin-Ho allowed himself a small smile. "As you can see, Commander, the situation is not as you assessed. I ask again, please state your peaceful intentions or leave this system." The Zelt commander looked off-screen, presumably at his own sensor readings, before turning back with a scowl. "This isn't over, human. The Zelt do not forget." The communication ended abruptly. Admiral Q, who had been watching from beside Jin-Ho, released a breath. "Will they attack?" Jin-Ho shook his head. "They're salvagers, not warriors. They prey on the helpless, not on well-defended fleets." Sure enough, the Zelt ships began to turn away. Their engines flared, and they disappeared into the darkness of space. "They may return with more ships," Q warned. "By then we'll be long gone," Jin-Ho replied. "Let's finish the drive installations. It's time your people had a new home." 8 months later, the combined human-Tellurian fleet approached a blue-green planet orbiting a yellow star. The journey had not been easy. The hybrid drives required constant monitoring and occasional adjustments. Several had failed completely and needed to be rebuilt, but they had made it. On the main view screen of the Tellurian flagship, the planet grew larger as they approached. A world of vast oceans, green continents and swirling white clouds. "The scans confirm it," Officer Day reported, her voice filled with emotion. "The atmosphere, temperature, and gravity are all within acceptable parameters for both our species. There are abundant resources and no signs of intelligent native life." Admiral Q stood with Captain Jin-Ho, both leaders watching the screen. Around them, Tellurians and humans worked side by side at various stations. After 8 months together, the two species moved around each other with comfortable familiarity. "We should send down survey teams," Jin-Ho suggested. "Make sure the environment is safe before beginning larger-scale landings." Q nodded. "Agreed. Joint teams, I think. We've learned that our species see things differently. Together, we miss less." Jin-Ho smiled at that. It was true. Throughout their journey, the complementary perspectives of humans and Tellurians had solved countless problems. 2 weeks later, Jin-Ho stood on the surface of the new world. Around him, temporary structures had been erected, the beginning of what would become the first Tellurian colony. The sky above was a deeper blue than Earth's, and the gravity was slightly lighter, giving each step a subtle bounce. Teams of humans and Tellurians worked together, setting up equipment, analyzing soil samples, and building more permanent structures. Children from both species played together near a small stream, seemingly unbothered by their physical differences. Engineer Kim approached, holding a tablet. Over the months, he had become good friends with Technical Officer Day, and together, they had refined the hybrid drive system to be more efficient. "The colony infrastructure is proceeding ahead of schedule, Captain," Kim reported. "The Tellurian architecture combined with human construction methods works better than either alone." Jin-Ho nodded. "What about the communication array?" "Operational? As of this morning. We've sent messages to both Earth and the remaining Tellurian colonies. They know we've succeeded." Dr. Song joined them, carrying samples from the local plants. "The ecosystem is remarkable," she said. "Many of the plants here have similar properties to those from the Tellurian homeworld, almost as if this planet was made for them." Jin-Ho looked around at the beautiful landscape. Or perhaps they were made for it. The universe has strange ways of bringing things together. That evening, a ceremony was held in the center of the new settlement. All the Tellurians who had been awakened from cryostasis gathered with the human crews. Admiral Q stood on a small platform with Captain Jin-Ho and the other leaders from both species. "Today," Q began, his voice carrying across the crowd, "we name our new home. After much discussion, we have chosen to call this world Harmony. May it be a place where our peoples continue to work together as we have these past months." The crowd cheered, the sounds of human and Tellurian voices blending together. Jin-Ho stepped forward next. "Many of the human crews will be returning to Earth soon. Our mission was to help you find a new home, and we have accomplished that." A murmur of sadness passed through the crowd. Over the journey, deep friendships had formed between the species. However, Jin-Ho continued with a smile, "The Earth Council has approved our proposal to establish a permanent human settlement here, alongside the Tellurian colony. Any humans who wish to stay are welcome to do so." This announcement was met with enthusiastic applause from both humans and Tellurians. Furthermore, Jin-Ho added, "The United Earth Alliance has officially recognized the Tellurian people as full allies. We will establish regular trade routes, scientific exchanges, and mutual defense agreements." Q stepped forward again, holding a small crystal container. Inside was a glowing blue substance. "This," he explained, "contains the genetic templates of our species, the essence of who we are. It is our most precious possession." He turned to Jin-Ho. "We give this to humanity as a symbol of our trust and gratitude. From this day forward, our peoples are bound together not by necessity, but by choice." Jin-Ho accepted the gift with deep respect. "We are honored by your trust, Admiral Q. Humanity will safeguard this always." As the sun set on their new world, casting golden light across the settlement, Jin-Ho looked out at the mixed crowd of humans and Tellurians. What had begun as a rescue mission had become something much more, the beginning of a lasting friendship between two species from different stars. Later, as Jin-Ho walked back to his temporary quarters, he passed two children playing. One human, one Tellurian. They were building something together out of local stones, laughing as they worked. Jin-Ho smiled. The future would have its challenges, but looking at these children, he felt certain that together, their peoples would thrive. All because when called upon, humanity had shown up. "Captain?" It was Kim, approaching with a communication device. "Earth is responding to our report. They want to speak with you." Jin-Ho nodded and took the device. As he prepared to report on their success, he glanced back at the growing colony, a place where beings from two different worlds had found common ground. "This is Captain Han Jin-Ho," he said into the device. "Mission accomplished, and so much more."